Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 16th Annual Shorecast, presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, also known as LIGHT. I'm Jane Buchanevich. I'm the Faculty Director of LIGHT, and I'm joined today by a panel of experts representing different segments of the gaming, hospitality, and tourism industry. Also by our moderator, Bree Young, who I'll introduce in just a moment. Shorecast is a look towards what we're to expect for the summer season here at the Jersey Shore. In the fall, we do Shore View, and we reflect back on how the previous summer results were. So I'm just going to set the stage for this morning's discussion. I just wanted to go over a few things from what happened last summer to set the stage for what we can look for this summer. Okay, so recap of Shore View 2023. At that time, total gross gaming revenue was up 11% over the previous year, but it was mostly because of internet gaming and mobile sports betting. In-person gross gaming revenue was relatively flat at 1% increase from 2022. Vehicle counts at the Pleasantville Toll Plaza were up 3.7%. And we noticed a trend of more focus in the casinos, because most of the data that I'm showing you here is from publicly available data from the Division of Gaming Enforcement. So we noticed a trend of more focus on non-gaming amenities by the casinos than ever before, and I'll show you some more detail on that in just a minute. Panelists in Shore View did report that weather last summer was a problem. Overnight stays in Cape May County were up 8%, but the stays were shorter than they were the previous summer. Casino employment was up in general, but some of the panelists from other sectors reported that labor shortages were still a problem. Okay, so this slide shows you by month, the summer season, May, June, July, August, and September, the vehicle counts at the Pleasantville Toll Plaza. So on the left side in blue is 2019, on the right side in gold is 2023. So you can see summer of 2023 was slightly better than the previous summer, but it never returned to the pre-pandemic levels of 2019. And this could have a number of factors. It could be the toll increase caused people to take other routes, or more people working from home. So it's hard to tell if that was all a decrease in tourism at this point. This shows you total gross gaming revenue by year, and the colors, the blue is slots, gold is table games, and the brown and gray are internet gaming and mobile sports betting. So you can see that the internet gaming and mobile sports betting and sports betting in general have provided a much higher percentage of the total gross gaming revenue than ever before. So this is a trend that we're watching. So total gross gaming revenue was up, but it was really primarily because of the growth in internet gaming. And this shows you just gross gaming revenue from internet gaming. So you can see it's been on an upward trajectory for years, and now it sets records. It's been setting records, even in 2024. I talked about the trend of the casinos focusing more on non-gaming amenities. This chart is to kind of show you the impact of that. So blue is casino revenue, gold is rooms, brown is food and beverage, and gray is other. So this chart shows you that non-gaming revenue, and this is net revenue. So net revenue is total gross gaming revenue less promotional expenses. So last summer, non-gaming net revenue was higher even than gaming revenue. So that's a trend that we're going to watch going forward. And this is the casino employment in 2023 in blue. So it was up over the previous summer, but it has never returned to pre-pandemic 2019. And 2018 was a recent peak when the Hard Rock and Ocean were opening. But so it hasn't returned to pre-pandemic levels. And this could be the operators gaining efficiencies, so it's not necessarily a sign of a labor shortage. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to our panel, hear what they have to say about what their outlook is for the summer. And our moderator today is Bree Young, who I'm very proud to say is a graduate of the Stockton Hospitality Program, and she's been nailing it in the community and in her job. She is the events coordinator and project manager for Good Time Tricycles. So Bree, I'm turning it over to you, and have a great panel.
Thank you. Jane, which button is it? Hi.
Hi.
How are you all doing?
Good.
Good. So yes, I'm Brianna Young. I am a project manager with Good Time Tricycle Productions, and here we are today at the 16th annual Jersey Shorecast. So Mark, why don't you start if you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Mark, excuse me, Mark Colazzo. My company's RMS Capital. I do real estate private equity. I'm most known for helping start what's known as the Orange Loop now, the ocean blocks of New York, Tennessee, and St. James Avenue.
Thank you.
Oliver Cook, Associate Professor of Economics at Stockton University, and I'm kind of a long-time contributor to these events and kind of watcher of the regional economy. Happy to be here.
Daniel Gallagher, I'm the Director of Sports Sales for Visit Atlantic City and Atlantic City Sports Commission. Most people just call me the sports guy, which is totally fine. But we are the content economic driver for convention, trade shows, and sporting events in Atlantic City.
And I'm Gary Musich. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Visit Atlantic City and the Atlantic City Sports Commission. Part of our primary focus as Visit Atlantic City is purely business development in the events world, meeting trade shows, consumer cultural events, sporting events.
Thank you all. So before we jump into the Shorecast of 2024, how do you think the local tourism industry performed in 2023?
Bad. Yeah, not good. Our customer count was down. Our average check was down. I'm sure everybody has their own opinion, but I think one of the biggest factors was that from 2020 to last summer, people didn't take the big vacations. You know, people were still afraid to get on a plane. And I know it's anecdotal, but when I was on Facebook all of last summer, everybody I know is in Italy. And I think people said, okay, I haven't been to Italy or I haven't been on a cruise in 3 years. I'm not going to go to the Jersey Shore this summer. I'm going to go to Italy. And I was one of them. And frankly, I spent 2 weeks in Rome, and it probably cost me the same as a week at a house in Margate. So I think that was where a lot of the tourism was lost to people taking the trips that they had put off for 3 years.
Gary, how do you think? What do you think?
So we had probably one of the best, this is for the future, so I'm very bullish with what we see in trends in the meeting and event business. You know, statistically, you lost 95% of that business due to the pandemic. 95% was just wiped out. Projecting through the end of 25, we participate in tourism economics that takes data nationwide and kind of, you know, we look at our data and where it compares, and it's on target to that. It projects the nationwide event business to be down 11% by the end of 25. We are probably going to be ahead of 2019 by then. We had the best production year, so what we booked in 23 was the best we've ever done, if you look back when it was the Convention Authority. So it's the rebound of the event business. So without a doubt, it's rebounding. We have new sporting events, and Dan will touch more on that. But we booked 290,000 rooms last year. That's $300 million to the destination. And that's over the next, we'll say, 4 years or so. So that's the most we've ever done. And now if you look at what gets consumed, because we track both, in the first quarter of this year, that business, specifically the property-specific events, are up 40%. So it's still not where it used to be, but for us, and we see the trend of pushing away from big cities, we see that business growing. Not all segments of it, but we do see the volume coming in growing, and And we see the interest in Atlantic City growing in the short term. So,
And to piggyback off of what Gary's saying, you know, looking at the slides and, you know, just attending the East Coast Gaming Congress the other day, you're seeing the rise in sports. Sports is one of the largest growing markets, except for maybe behind cannabis, which if you have a chance, go over to see the Champs at the convention center right now. It's bulging at the seams. But, you know, to that point, you know, you saw that 1.6 billion was done in direct tax revenue through iGaming and in sports wagering, and that 11.1 billion was done in direct revenue. From the Atlantic City Sports Commission side of it, we came off of a banner year. We did, you know, about 75,000 room nights in sports alone, which was, you know, 250,000 people in the destination and 100 million in economic impact. So sports is on the rise right now, and we're seeing that. And there's no question that that's here to stay. The question is, how do we diversify our portfolio to get these sports athletes, these spectators, this affluent demographic to raise that check price, you know, as one of Mark's properties down there.
Yeah, my take on this is I kind of piggyback off some prior comments. I think that there was a little bit of the pandemic summer was obviously so terrible, and then 21, the economy kind of had started to reopen. We were still learning things about how to function, I think, for a lot of businesses. And so 21 came back. I think 22 was a very robust summer. And then depending upon kind of what industry we in last year, I think there's some of this, certainly some pent-up demand that perhaps like took some folks other places. But my general take on last summer was that it was pretty decent, certainly in like Cape May, from what I kind of know kind of off the top of my head in terms of like tax and, you know, hotel motel tax revenue. You can clearly see last summer was pretty robust. Hiring in terms of L&H, leisure and hospitality, employment last summer was up. So perhaps not as robust in some areas as 22 was, because I really think as the 22 summer as kind of being the real bounce back from COVID. And so maybe there's some places that didn't quite see that kind of bounce back. So I don't know, we'll kind of see. I'll have more to say about kind of what I'm looking at in terms of kind of moving forward. But my general sense is that we're still in a pretty robust economic environment right now.
Well, that's a good segue into our next question, which is, how would you describe the region's current economic circumstances?
I mean, I hate to be all doom and gloom, but first quarter wasn't great. I think we had a lot of weather problems. I do have concerns about the overall economy. So I'm optimistic for a good summer, but first quarter wasn't a great start.
I would say, yeah, cautiously optimistic for the summer. I mean, I think that I was telling someone, I think that there's, at the kind of very macro level, when you look at a lot of kind of headline numbers, job growth right now has kind of picked up over the first quarter for Atlantic City proper relative to where we were like late 2023. Kind of at the national level, unemployment remains very, very low. We've seen continuation of kind of robust job growth despite like last week's kind of, you know, a little bit of a slowdown. So again, my sense is that we're in a pretty decent place. All of the headline metrics, certainly at the national level, the state level, even, you know, locally, the unemployment rate, despite, you know, 2 years of, you know, rising interest rates, obviously tied to the Fed's kind of inflation fighting mode, you know, the unemployment rate is like a little north of 6% for Atlantic City, which is higher than the state and the nation, but 6% is, you know, not that far from where we were pre-pandemic, you know, and it hasn't, you know, gone crazy. So that's my sense.
I touched on it, you know, and again, we're a piece of this. You know, I think part of the discussion has to be how do we market this city? I think that's a big part of what we're all talking about, and consolidation and message and branding, and maybe that's coming up here, Bree, as a discussion. We've done that. You know, we're changing some gears in how we deploy and focus and talk about how we sell this city. And we see some results of that. Like forever, our industry has gone to Good Time Tricycle is an example, John, to say, here, we have this many rooms, this much space, and we can do this for you. We've stopped talking about what makes our community unique. And as we started doing that last year, we call it an education series, we started talking about other things. What kind of charities are we involved with? We bring up Mud Girls and other things. What's sustainability? What's the community like? Is it just Atlantic City, or are there other attributes in this county that can make our brand look and feel better? And I believe it is. And so as we've changed that conversation, we've connected with potential customers on a different level, which, you see this short-term bump at that, but more importantly, you see an interest in the second-tier type cities. Because remember what's happened in this industry on our side of things, what's the first thing companies do? They eliminate big chunks of their marketing departments. That's their event teams. That's their planner teams. They outsource that to independent planners and companies like Helms Briscoe and some of these companies that just focus as independent planners on that. So our world has gotten a lot smaller. So we see a reaction to that. And our numbers in the first quarter show that. Convention center's flat. Rooms associated with the convention center are up. Attendance is up. The way we track attendance has changed a little bit. So you'll actually see some dips and for that, to put it into perspective, one registration is one person. They might be here for 4 days. One ticket per day for a multi-ticketed day is 4 people. And we've tracked things, and this skews numbers, but we've tracked that one registration as 4 people. And the industry doesn't do that. So you see dips in some of that. But rooms economics, it's all up in the first quarter. And this hotel specific, like I said, room usage 40% through March kind of supports some of the trends, but certainly supports that segment is coming back for the casino industry.
Yeah, thank you. I know we felt the effect of labor shortages in 2023. Do we still feel like that's going to have an impact in 2024 on our upcoming tourism season?
I mean, I'm not seeing it near as much as it was. I think there's plenty of people looking for jobs, but I think the wage inflation is not going away. Pre-pandemic, I think pizza makers made $15 to $20 an hour, and now they make $25 to $30 an hour, and it's not going to go back because wage inflation is sticky. So we're just stuck with those higher wages. But I think there's plenty of people that are looking and willing to work now.
Yeah, I agree. Last summer, relative to the summer, the pre-COVID summer, so summer of 2019, the labor force locally here was down about 1.2% or so. So the anecdotal, I can't find people made a lot of sense. And I think some of that is basically kind of, as you think about the labor force, you can either have people changing their participation rates, which obviously influences how many people are available to work. And then there's outright, of course, population loss, right? And so for several years leading up to the pandemic, Atlantic City, the county I'm talking specifically, actually had 5 consecutive years of population declines. That was pre-pandemic. The pandemic cost another year of outmigration for, I think, for obvious reasons. And in some sense, it was one of the most hardest hit metropolitan areas in the country. And we've seen pretty anemic population growth over the last couple of years. And so there's definitely, but like to Mark's point, like the visa, the J visa program, right? The J1. This is kind of now back online, right? That obviously got really hit during COVID, and it kind of spilled in because there was a backlog at the State Department the summer after that. But these kinds of things are starting to finally kind of get back on track, and so I suspect there'll probably be less of the constraint as it relates to finding people. The wage issue that Mark mentioned, I think that's a different thing. I agree with him largely. Once the wages have ratcheted up, and clearly now in the state of New Jersey, owing to minimum wage legislation a few years ago, every January 1, right, we get a bump now because it's indexed. That's not obviously going away.
Yeah, I'm a sports guy, right? So I look at the sports metrics, and what I'm noticing and what I'm seeing across our different landscapes is that due to the rise in the value of sports right now, that we are ramping up to be able to support these events. You know, in February when futsal's in and if there's 6,000 athletes roaming around the streets of Atlantic City, you're watching these eateries ramp up, you know, to a more year-round, still not that skeleton staff that it used to be, because hopefully the demand is providing that. So, you know, as Atlantic City continues to grow its convention and visitors market as well as the sports market, you know, how will these eateries, these retail stores be able to adapt to staffing appropriately so that we're able to fit the needs of the conventions and trade shows that come into town is going to be important for sure.
I also think you have to keep in perspective, you know, there's challenges with managing these big hotels and casinos, and, you know, restaurants close, and are they closing due to staffing issues? You get to points when big events are in the city where sometimes you can't find a place to have breakfast. And so that's, I don't know if that's the result of just managing business or staffing. You know, it is an issue right now. You know, but this city, you know, we have 18,000 rooms here in this city. And that's just here. That doesn't count outside of here. Philadelphia has 14. You know, so when you put it in perspective of the size we are and what you need to operate consistently in here, it's a challenge, no matter how you slice that up. You know, you're talking about, you know, a product here that's as big as a major tier 1 city. But we're so seasonal, and so weekends, you know, and midweeks empty, and weekends are jamming, and it's hard to fill this. It's hard to staff it and have people consistently, you know, make a decent wage where they're not moving around, and we create service and consistency by that.
Yeah, that's very insightful going into 2024 season. Do you anticipate anything else happening impacting performance this summer, and what do you think that impact will be? Positive, negative?
I mean, weather's the big wild card. I think if we have good weather, we're going to have a good season.
Yeah, rained a lot last summer.
Yeah.
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 For sure. Yeah, weather's always is always the obvious wild card. I think it will be interesting to the extent, as you think about Mark's prior comment about like everyone going to Europe. I was actually in Greece for 2 weeks, but it's always a question of like to what extent does inflation differentially impact certain segments, right, and demographic groups? Because you can make a case that you know, continuing high inflation, especially like eat out of home inflation, right? Which I think everyone who goes to dinner these days is like, wow, yeah, that bill is a lot bigger than it used to be. That also, I think, kind of feeds into maybe, as opposed to flying somewhere else, maybe now you get like, okay, we're going to tighten up and we're going to be closer to home, right? And so there's always this question of like, do you get like these substitution effects, right? As people are fighting gas, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to drive to Florida, right, or fly to Florida, but we might actually like do the vacation. So I think this complicates always, right, to some extent, what the summer is going to look like.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, I always talk about our where we're geographically located, and I think you bring up a great point, because you look at airfare prices nowadays. You know, your trip to Las Vegas is probably well over $700, and you know, look back at that a couple years ago, that same flight was $350. Yeah. So where we're located geographically, I think actually supports that we're going to see a great summer, because to your point, people are willing to get in the car and drive. Are they willing to get on an airplane and fly and you know, pay all those ridiculous fees that come along with that? But I will say that I'm extremely optimistic about this summer. Part of our kind of mission statement this year moving forward is to how do we, you know, obviously we're not doing the beach concerts this year, right? Yeah. So how do we have more signature events for our destination this year? So part of that is this one weekend in June, right? Think about this, June 21st, 22nd weekend, right? We have the offshore powerboat racing, which is going to take place. You know, we're expecting 10,000 people for that. Also on Bader Fields, the NXL Paintball Championships. Also that weekend is Race Across America. Also that weekend is North to Shore, right? So that's one weekend that, while we don't have the beach concert that we used to, now we're kind of diversifying the demographic that's coming in, right? So, you know, a beach concert, that band has a demographic that follows it. This is 4 different demographics that are coming into our area that probably haven't been here in the past. So that's one thing. And then on the other side of it is, we always talk about expanding the summer. There's a reason why Miss America was the weekend that it was, right? And then obviously that went away. And then we had the Ironman competition. The Ironman did great. This year, we're hosting the USAT Mixed Age National Championship. So that's the largest triathlon in the country. 6,500 athletes will be here that same weekend, September 12th and 13th weekend. So, for us as Visit Atlantic City and the Atlantic City Sports Commission, it's about what we can do to do business development for the area. So, looking back, the summer was cost prohibitive. You can't have these events. The room rates are going to be too high. But I think if you work strategically with your partners, there's a way to get it done to still drive tourism on needed dates. We're busy 4th of July to Labor Day. People say Memorial Day to Labor Day, but I think everyone knows between Memorial Day and 4th of July, there's still kind of a little bit of a lull. So how can we work in those months, I think, is paramount.
And Dan touched on, the communication for all of us, and this goes back to what I said earlier, Visit Atlantic City Sports Commission's job is to develop events, not just meetings, trade shows, and that's why we're jumping into things like this offshore power boat. You got to consolidate all of this and have one group of people have the right business structure, have the right message, right branding, right funding, and then hold them accountable for this. You can't have, I've been out of town for a while, and I came back a year ago, and one of the things, I know this is post-COVID stuff, but it's time we got to stop blaming COVID and start thinking about how behaviors of our customers are changing. We lost beach concerts. How do we have silos. We had all these silos and people doing their own thing because we all stopped talking about how do we do it together. So we start doing things, and all of a sudden, okay, we have to expand our partnerships and our discussions. So we're collectively talking about those softer weekends, not just with the business community, with people like Mark, but with the Casino Association and with everybody, the chamber, everybody, so we know where do we point ourselves to help fill these holes and expand the summer and continue to grow it. Because otherwise, we're all doing our own thing. We jam things all together, and we start working on offshore power boat, and other opportunities pop up, and the reality is you got to buy business into this city right now, and you'll have to keep doing that. That's everywhere. Philadelphia has a $7 million business development fund. $7 million. That's how you get World Cup. That's how you get things that's how Detroit got, the draft. So if you take any of these events, that's how you got NAACP here. We don't have an airport. You can slice this up however you want. If you want to really grow some of this, we don't even bid on the biggest things because the requirements we can't fulfill. We can fulfill rooms. We can fulfill other aspects of it, but you're always going to be in the regional box because you just can't get people here. We go to these big bids, and this goes to the big sporting events. If you're not within certain distance to airports or population densities, you can't bid. You don't have a shot. You're not even on the list. You can't. If you're not willing to put millions into some of this, you're not there. We had opportunities at beach concerts at Bader Field years ago. What did we do? We went to the promoter and said, okay, it's now going to cost you so much more money than every other city. What do? They fulfill their 2-year or 3-year agreement, and then they're gone. Instead of making that sustainable, we milked them, and now they're gone. And now the beach concerts are leaving, and you need those signature events. But I think if we're all talking together and the message is the same and the branding is the same, and you structure this right, and then we're doing it together, you have a better opportunity to get these events to be sustainable on a long term. But that's what I think the answer is. You have to have sustainable, these destination events that are on a long-term basis.
Dan and Gary, I know you both touched on it, the absence of beach concerts and the presence of new events like North to Shore and things like that impacting the summer season. How do you see that affecting us? And Gary, I know you mentioned marketing it collectively.
So I think all of this needs to start in January. We're doing it kind of now, and that's a funding issue and a discussion issue. I think if the beach, again, it has to be subsidized. So if the beach concerts aren't going to work, and I think they're great, but you know what? If you're standing in the water watching a concert, it's not a great experience. If I'm back by Landshark and I have to watch a concert, I just paid $250 for a ticket on a video, that's not a great experience either. So what else do we do to create these? I don't have the answer, but Bader Field's an option. Subsidizing things back into Boardwalk Hall are an option. We seem to have just walked away. And, you know, we'll see. We'll see how it impacts the summer. Look, 70,000 people on the beach on a weekend in the summer, I'm not convinced overall that creates an impact. It creates, I think, product for the city. And people talking about the city. And if you look at Asbury, you know, what did they do? They created this sustainable beach festival there, and it worked there, you know, and have we ever looked at that model? It's expensive to do them. Are there options? Yes, but I don't know why we're not talking about them. You know, Boardwalk Hall's underutilized right now. Yeah. You know, what do you do to, you know, we have a fund and we have to buy business into the convention center and into the properties. But we don't do that, you know, with events. You know, Boardwalk Hall, you know, I'm of the opinion, you know, get promoters in here and you know, give them everything at cost initially. Build these parts of our businesses up where they are standing on their own 2 feet. And maybe some of us need to be equity partners in some of this. So you're buying into it, and then organizations like ours, and we're a private company. You know, people think we're part of the CR. We're not. We're a private company, and then our funding becomes sustainable. So again, collective discussion maybe, but you know, we'll see. We'll see if they have an impact on us. I think they certainly image-wise do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Gary. We're gonna get a chance to see here what the counterfactual actually looks like, because for whatever it's been, almost a decade or something like that at this point, heavily subsidized. But, you know, measuring the return, you know, the economic impact return is always, you know, kind of a question mark, because you can't run the counterfactual, right? So we're gonna get a chance to actually see that to some extent and see. Now, things like, you know, into S, maybe that, you know, helps a little bit and you can fill in, but, you know, 70,000 people standing on the beach, whether or not they're having a great time and really feel they're coming back or not, it's still 70,000 people, right? And, you know, in terms of just the small business community, feet on the ground, it's hard to imagine that doesn't have an impact for a lot of small businesses, the restaurants, obviously.
Yes, no
Mark
question.
can speak to this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say honestly, the beach concerts, with the exception of Fish, were bad for our business. We were typically down. I think people came, went to the beach concert, got in their car and left, went to the hotel and slept, but didn't venture out into the city.
Yeah.
Fish was an anomaly. We would always have the after party, so it was actually our biggest week of the year. Every year
They're hungrier than everybody else.
Yeah.
Too. So,
But yeah, just the regular beach concerts were actually bad for business.
you know, and to touch on that, and again, I don't know that any of us know a formula right now, but people do that. That's the behavior in a lot of cases, right? They're going to come, but it also, I think, you displace certain customers. I'm not going in there. That's that day of the concerts.
Sure.
You know, say I'm not going to be able to get a hotel. It's going to be expensive, or the traffic sucks, or all these things. So I'm not even going to go. So your comments, Mark, you hear that? You know, the casino properties have a harder time marketing it. You know, they see a dip in some cases. I haven't talked to them about it, but I'd be curious to hear what their thoughts are. Back to, you know, Boardwalk Hall becomes a manageable option as an entertainment option in town, like Addis, you know, like Ocean, like any of the other theaters.
So I know we know what we're missing on the beach this summer and what's coming with North to Shore and the plethora of sporting events you have, Dan. So looking into the future, are there other new challenges or new opportunities to consider going into the 2024 season?
I'll take it from a sports perspective.
Yeah.
You know, for us, it's the Wild Wild West in a very, very, very good way. You know, I was on the Mike Lopez show yesterday, and we talked about the growth of women in sports. And first of all, long overdue. These women deserve to be celebrated years and years ago. But you're watching unprecedented times. When did we think that an Omaha, Nebraska volleyball game would sell out and break records at 92,000 people? Caitlin Clark's salary, $73,000, $28 million deal with Nike, right? And you're asking, how is this applicable to Atlantic City? We had 4,000 female wrestlers in the NJSIAA wrestling tournament at Boardwalk Hall this year. That would have never been a thing before. So you're seeing direct economic impact in those sports and through the growth of women in sports. And to piggyback off of that, also the college landscape is different than it's ever been, right? These NIL deals are now attracting a new demographic of parents with kids in sports. I said this the other day, the average mean of salary in a family is $250,000 to support 2 kids in sports. Of that $250,000, $30,000 for 2 kids annually goes to youth sports. That's because you don't just play for your high school team anymore. You play for your travel team, you play for your AAU team, you play for your club team, and if you have time, you play for your high school team. What does that mean for us? That means that these parents are spending that $30,000 by coming to Atlantic City, staying in our hotels, eating at our restaurants, gambling in our casinos. So I think there's a ton of growth potential due to the change of the collegiate landscape and due to the rise of women in sports, for sure.
I'll say I think there's opportunity out there. Sports was one of them. I was skeptical of all this. And it's a segment that we focused on, and like Dan said, now it's $100 million in economic impact to the city. I think the most important thing we do as a business community is consolidate our marketing effort, consolidate the message, everybody get on the same page, everybody get in the room and agree on what that is, get the structure of that organization right, fund it, and at least we know the structure's right, the message is agreed to, the branding is agreed to. If you don't like the people doing it, change the people out, get the people in there that can do the job, but we have to do that. We've stopped doing it, right? So there's no generic branding. We don't have funding for it. It's not funded. So it's not out there. The days, everybody can argue, if you go back, the days of the Atlantic City Alliance, and, they had this funding, and, was it appropriately spent? You can argue all that stuff. It was, it wasn't, it doesn't matter. But the reality is, the Atlantic City name was out there more. When you had the convention authority, you had a branding plan and structure and strategy in place. We have to get back to that. I think it's critical because I think it helps all businesses. It allows us to talk on a broader scale about investment. There was $800 million of investment that went into this city recently. How many people know about that? Outside of, we talk to people outside here, the business community. It's on our website. We think that's important to tell people because if there's investment coming, there's a reason for that. It's not common, it's common sense. I guess I would want to do business there. There's no downside to all talking about this and consolidating this. Why we haven't done it, I don't know. Again, I get a little bit more of standing behind I'm the new guy, the old new guy back. But unless somebody, I don't know why we've not done that. And I hope we continue. The effort's there. Progress is being made. Everybody has to be on that same page. So, not that I agree necessarily with the Do AC thing, because I think that was a campaign, not a brand. It was a good one, and it worked, and everybody talked about it. It was funded. Now how do we just talk about what we are? We're Atlantic City. And how do you visit Atlantic City? And that same effort has to be put into that. And we all have to have a say in it, without a doubt.
Oliver, do you have any?
I think all of this is important, but I've always kind of thought about now for the last 15 years, as you kind of think about Atlantic City and you think about the kind of declining economic impact of the casinos, and here I'm talking specifically in terms of like income generation at the employee level, job creation, an industry that 15 years ago was 45, 50,000 people. Today it's like 19,000 people. despite the fact that revenues, total industry revenues per employee have gone up by 140% over the last decade, right? For all the reasons I think everyone understands as it kind of relates to iGaming and sports wagering and whatnot. I do think that one of the things long term that Atlantic City is going to have to do is transform itself from being a place that produces a commodity, an entertainment commodity, as important as that I think is going to remain, that ultimately requires visitation, to something that actually you can sell, absent people actually being here, because it puts such tremendous pressure, right, on the entire regional economy to say, hey, to these guys' point, right, and I think these efforts are obviously not going away. You got to get people to come, right? I mean, that was the thing that casinos did. You didn't have to just do just the summer. The casinos provided you a 12-month, while the East Coast gaming monopoly existed, and obviously it no longer does, they provided you a means of getting people on the streets, right, to some extent. And that's just, that we're not going back to that, right? And so these efforts, right, to bring people in, those returns on those dollars, they're going to become harder because you have to subsidize, you have to go out and you have to find investors to ultimately get people, get into Atlantic City. So I think that is going to remain important, but I also think in terms of kind of diversifying, as I've said for a decade plus for people who know me, finding a way to diversify beyond just the leisure and hospitality industry is going to be very, very important, like over the long haul.
I think the overlooked piece here is the city needs to fix itself. So Gary said there's no place to have breakfast when there's a convention in town. Wednesday in November, a teachers' convention. That day, I'm sure you couldn't get breakfast anywhere. The following Wednesday, every breakfast place was dead. There's 30-some-odd thousand people in the city, half are below the poverty line. So most people aren't going out to breakfast on a random Wednesday. So we can't have the services needed to support all these conventions, and that's why there's an overflow when there's a big convention and a deficit when there is no convention. So bringing people to the city is really what we need to change. I like to do this exercise where I go, everybody in the room who lives in Atlantic City proper, raise your hand. Bingo. Yeah, and that's the problem. People come here, they work here, they get in their car and they drive offshore to where their house is. And the city's not going to change until we have more of a population that lives here. And now the discussion won't be how many coffee shops can one or two survive. Now it's going to be, do we need 3, 4, or 5? And that's really what we need to work on. And adding people also helps the clean and safe perception.
Right, and
for sure.
I was just going to say we've skirted this.
Yeah.
You and I spoke about it recently at a chamber thing, but you can't skirt that. And when in the day and age where a lot of the investment and facilities have never looked better, we have to choreograph showing new people the city the right way to come through this. Look, let's be realistic. You can't drive down Atlantic Avenue. That is who we are, and we need to all be part of that effort. The clean and safe, for a year that I've been back, we're talking about it, and maybe I'm missing something. Not much has happened during that year. You guys have dealt with it longer than I have, but somewhere that has to occur. We're arguing over how to pave a street. Let's sit down and figure out how to pave the street, because you can't even drive down it right now. And what does it look better? But we've stopped all of it, and we're arguing over things like that instead of fixing things. And I think let's get everybody back into their area of expertise. The CRDA is best at, projects and supporting those things, and hold Visit Atlantic City responsible with collective marketing. So we're all on the same page with that. The Clean and Safe group meets every 2 weeks. Before the election, you couldn't get in the room. Now it's like me and Mike Sampson. There's nobody else in the room. So, I don't know what the answer is, but it's vital.
It's population.
Yeah, it is.
You need people to live here. You need people to get engaged in politics and vote and get involved with the clean and safe meetings and all of those things.
And it's what Asbury did.
Yeah, yeah. And we have high taxes. We have the perception of clean and safe, so it's not really an attractive offer to live in the city, and those are what needs to change. So.
Thank you all. Do you have any closing statements before we jump into the questions and answers from the audience?
I was going to say that, with all these potential opportunities, there is an elephant in the room, and that's the New Jersey casino, the New York casinos coming on board, right? And what that looks like for us. And, everyone's worried about Pennsylvania opening their casinos. They were talking about 20 to 30% it would affect us. It didn't, mainly because of the tax rate. Brick and mortar, you gamble, it's 8%. Online, 8.5%. Online, 13%. Pennsylvania, brick and mortar, 33%, online 52%, right? So if you're a real bettor, you're going to still bet in New Jersey, cross state borders, and go back. New York, we don't know what that tax rate's going to look like, but those are 4 casinos, 4 licenses that are going to open up. So, Gary brings up a good point. We're talking about it now. I think we're more collected than we've been in a very long time. I think more people are talking that should be talking together. I'm a big fan of the phrase that a rising tide raises all boats, but I think a better phrase is that we're all in different boats but in the same storm. So, having that conversation with different people that are stakeholders in this industry is conversations that we need to have to protect our city for what will be inevitable in these casinos opening up in New York. So having these things now is vital.
And the other piece of that is, the Meadowlands wants to build a big convention center. And so if they do that, they think that they're going to steal Javits' business. That's not going to happen. No event planner thinks that's a good idea. I'm not sure who thinks it's a good idea other than, the chamber and I would do the same thing if I were up there. But the reality is there's no hotels there. You're going to see big events that are here. You're going to lose all those. They're going to go to either every other year or they're going to break themselves up and do north and south in those events. That's just as much a concern to me. For our business, it's a bigger concern because you'll lose a third of that. You'll lose a third of that million people that market generates. The meetings, trade show, and events market, sports, all of that, is 1 million people a year to this city. And that convention center will take at least a third of that. And we're ignoring that one. And that one's a lot closer. And the state supports that, but the industry doesn't think that's a good idea. They think it's a terrible idea. The people that use Javits thinks it's terrible. You think people are going to go back and forth paying $18 or $16 or whatever the toll is, sit in traffic to go to an event there? They're not. And you need those New York hotel rooms to support that. So overall, it's a financial, I think, misread, and we're not paying attention to that here, and we should be.
Any last closing
No.
statements? No? Awesome. Questions from the audience?
Anybody have a question?
My name's Rich Barely, and we're talking about, I guess, one of the people that I remember from college, Stockton graduate, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And over and over and over and over again, we hear this clean and safe. And I'm really sick and tired of it, is that, you go down the street, Gary, you just said, fix the street. I mean, it's just a disgrace. I mean, it's so simple. And whether the other safe is perception or reality, perception is reality. I'm a marketer, I'm an advertiser, and perception is reality. And we just don't address it. And, if it takes cops out of the street or whatever, Mark, you have a phenomenal investment over there, and people have to feel safe over there. And to say it over and over, for 20, 30 years I've been, active, 40 years in real estate business. And why can't we wake up and do it? Because, you mentioned about the inevitable casinos in New York. That's going to be a dagger in why are people going to come down here? The other thing I was discussing with somebody the other night, I've been to Vegas several times, and when you go into Vegas, you come off the plane and you go in there and you feel a wow. You feel the lights. You look at the casinos and you say, man, I've arrived. Well, We don't have that. We're not even meeting the basic needs. I've mentioned like 30 years ago at the toll booth when we're getting ripped off now for $5 or whatever it is there, even has something spectacular so you feel like you're entering into something and then to set the tone. We're not doing that. And, you know, I think we lost, and maybe you guys can comment, about maybe 3 or 5 years ago, we had the younger people coming in here to Harrah's and the various venues with the nightclubs. I don't know, has that slacked off or whatever, because we were targeting them. But, you know, unless we, you know, stop talking about clean and safe and actually address it today, we're not going to go anywhere, I think, or it's going to be a major challenge. My question is Dan, is it?
Yes.
Is it, with these events, why can't, my wife and I go to concerts all the time. When we go to Camden or we go to Philadelphia or other venues, do they pay the bands to go there or the promoter? I just don't understand why we're paying a promoter to have 40,000 people show up to a venue.
I'll touch on that if I could jump. I mean, the cost to do business here is high. So if you look, you're a promoter, right? You're going to come to Boardwalk Hall with, this is the basic of it, right? How does the entertainment business work? You know, you're buying a product, right? So if I'm the management of Aerosmith, and I'm going to go to Philadelphia, and I'm going to go, and I have 18,000 seats, and the cost of productions, I can sell 36,000 seats. I'm going to sell out 2 nights. If the same cost is 12,000 seats here in Atlantic City, I'm not on that route. So you have to buy that show. Now you're dealing with minimums. I mean, that's the business side of this. So you're dealing with minimums, and what is Aerosmith's minimums? Anybody know? John, what's Aerosmith's minimum? $2 million? So I have to buy the show for $2 million, right? So I'm the promoter now. Boardwalk Hall's a promoter. Can you make money on $2 million in Boardwalk Hall with 12,000 seats? Probably not. You know, when you had Madonna there and these big names, those are subsidized by Caesars Entertainment or somebody else as the promoter. That's the risk you take. So we have structural issues with that. So the beach concerts were an answer to that, because now you have a venue that can hold 50,000 or whatever numbers. I don't even know what the number was out there, but you know, but that's what you're dealing with. So there is no financial answer to that here, other than to subsidize the operation of those buildings, drive down the cost, open it up to some different types of entertainment, and make it cheaper for a promoter to use that. You know, I don't know the real estate structure here, but you know, in some of the dilapidated properties, you know, and I don't know what they've done in other cities, where's the harm in giving those properties away under guidelines that in 3 years you have to be here and you own it? You got to be here in 1 year, here in 2, and here in 3, and if not, I'm taking it back, and you lose every penny. I think we have to be aggressive about it. But the event side, the concert-specific side, all that, the Live Nation still couldn't make any money doing it without being subsidized. So their subsidy agreement, I think, is over. So they're not doing it. You have to find another way to do that. And if anybody, I might be wrong on that. If anybody knows the answer to that, I'm not 100% sure on the subsidy.
The comparison to Las Vegas is it actually was a wrong comparison because of the tax structure that actually happens in Las Vegas on top of the reinvestment that Visit Las Vegas and their tourism committee makes within these programs. So when you walk off an airport into the airport in Las Vegas, that's subsidized by Nevada, right? So their tax structure, they allow for things and rebates that New Jersey and Atlantic City doesn't. So they actually lean into that.
Right. And just to speak from a sports perspective, you know, we are an expensive town to do business with. There's no question about that. I don't think our sports market would be successful if we didn't have the help from the CRA to purchase $1 million worth of sport court. And what does that mean, right? That means that our clients will have to spend the $90,000 to ship this product from Salt Lake City, Utah, to us, right? So we're taking that financial burden off of them. We're putting it in our building. The building's making more money that way. Our union carpenters are putting it down, and it becomes more cost-effective for the client to do that. Had that initial investment not been put in place, we wouldn't be doing the business that we're doing. So a lot of these cases, we do buy the business, and then we weigh the risk reward and the economic impact that it brings. Not everyone's a home run, but part of what we do is vet that client to make sure that, you know, we're at least hitting triples and doubles out of the park. Right?
And also to John, what John said about Vegas has a $250 million marketing budget. $250 million. You know, that, I mean, They own the conventions. I mean, it's $250 million. I mean, that sums it up right there. Our tax structure, John and I just spoke about this, as Beer Fest just finished up, and you pay your tax on a guest room here, add it up, right? Well, all the taxes, your tourism fees, your taxes, your luxury tax, whether it's on a ticket you're selling, a glass of wine, or your guest room. We have, and every city's got added tax. You go to New York, you have a Javits tax. It's $2, I think, or whatever it is. It supports the subsidies and of Javits. But all these events, we have to remember one thing. That I don't see any of that changing, other than how do we find more funding to do all this, to answer those types of questions, to help support companies to develop new things in here. And how do you do those things? And that's, again, together, finding the funding to do that, because we don't have the funding to do it. It sounds great. All this stuff sounds great. We all have good ideas, but it costs. It's not cheap to do it. And when people compare us to Vegas, but, you're comparing $10 million budgets to $250 million budgets. There is no comparison, and that's a lot of it's. That's why what you see there, is Visit Las Vegas owns these assets, and they've invested it over time. I think the answer is that we have to collectively, we have to have the state involved. We have to look at what opportunities are out there from a funding perspective. I think the messaging, it's critical that the messaging changes. Are you going to ever revisit the tax structure and find out why you pay luxury tax on a concert ticket only if you buy it in this city? Is that right?
No, if it's specifically.
If the event's here. We're treated different here. So if you're a promoter of any concerts, we started this with concerts, and you're in Union and you go buy a ticket, you're going to pay an extra 9% here. So if you're Red Light Management, Star Hill, right, who did the Bader Field concerts, that was enough for them to say it cost me too much money to stay here. So there's no answers to some of this, but these are the issues that you, as a promoter, these are the issues, and as marketing people, business development people, we're business development people, not marketing. But that's what the customers want. Here's why I don't come here. Here's not why I'm not doing that.
That tax structure, so previous to COVID, most producers or promoters absorb that. Now it's just not feasible, so you pass it on to a consumer, which then falls into like the casino hotel rooms do, or any hotel room does. Now the consumer looks at it and says, well, Atlantic City's too expensive for the product I'm getting. And that's just either the promoter or producer, eats it on one end, or they pass it on to the consumer. And post-COVID, everybody passes those taxes or those ancillary fees onto a consumer.
Right. Even a 3.5% credit card fee. Everybody charges that now. It used to be, and it's the reality.
Thank you. I think we only have time for maybe one more question. I saw your hand first before.
I'm going to steal a little time and say two things. Rich's first question was, why do we have to pay the promoters to come here? And I believe the correct answer to that is, that's our investment to get the promoter here, and then getting those people here creates ancillary money inside the community that has the benefit that makes it valid to do that. So we're paying to help that promoter bring that event here, and then their economic impact in the community pays that back, and then some in dividends. That was number one. Number two, my question is, how do we compete better? How do we reduce expenses and overall cost to get these bigger shows here outside of subsidies? Because there has to be, as a businessman, the first thing I look at is, how do I cut cost to be more competitive? How do we as Atlantic City find a way to be more competitive outside of subsidies, because subsidies are here and there, they're a 1 year or 2 year fix? How do we do that?
Well, I would tell you that every single city has business development subsidies. That's what you're competing against. So you're either doing it via discounts. Let's use a convention center or Boardwalk Hall as an example. Dan deals with it in the sports world about what does that package, that security package cost. But everybody, that's the way of the world right now. If you want to be in the event business until we, kind of flush through this whole, there's more of it now than ever. If you want to bid on something as simple as the American Legion's annual conference, $1 million out of the gate. Just for that, $1 million, just to bid. That's it, that's in the bid. If you don't have $1 million, don't bother. It's like that with all events, right? I mean, Dan bids on these major sporting events. There's a giant financial commitment.
There's a bid fee even to get to the table before you even get one person in the door.
Right.
And to answer that question, there needs to be a different funding model, it's always been a staggering stat to me. Atlantic City is the highest revenue generating city in the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is the 5th highest revenue generating state in the country. How are we bankrupt, right? So if you hear those figures in your head, it doesn't even make sense. So how does that funding model funnel back to Atlantic City, collectively speaking, so that we can take those monies and apply them directly to real economic drivers that are going to produce real ROI in the destination?
Right, and you got the pilot program, and this goes back to investors, Mark, and again, correct me if I drift here, because some of this I'm just educating myself on, but like CRDA, that money that's supposed to be going into roads and facades and lights, and it's paying city debt down, correct? I mean, it's supposed to go, the pilot program's supposed to go through 26. But if you put everybody back in their responsibility box when that occurs, and hopefully it's sooner than later, where is that money goes where it belongs? We have a tourism district, and the money that's supposed to go into developing that goes into paying debt down. So we haven't been investing back in our roads or any part of it. We went through a peak there, right? And the walk got built, and you beautified the boardwalk, and you did those things. But right now we're paying debt down, and we're going to be paying debt down, correct me if I'm wrong, through 26, I think. Is that right? So, I think the plan, it's mid-24. That's a year and a half away. We need to be planning now. How is that, let's structure it. Again, I'll say it again. So let's structure these organizations properly, and then a collective plan about what happens with that, whatever it is a year, $26 million a year right now? Is that what it is? Goes to pay debt service down?
It was 90 million.
Oh, maybe it's 90 million.
Yeah. But you bring up a good point. What happens to the city budget in 26 when that money goes away? So,
gentlemen, we're going to take one last question from our guests online, and it's regarding employment. So we may have touched on it briefly earlier, but they were wondering what we were seeing in terms of seasonal workers from out of the country. There was at one point a backlog with the State Department. So if hiring for seasonal workers from out of the country improved from when there was a backlog at the State Department a couple of years ago, and if there are any expectations that those workers will return to pre-pandemic numbers this year.
I mentioned it very briefly. By 2022, actually, there's about 5,000 of these largely student exchange visitors, I think is what they're technically called by the State Department, that come basically to the Jersey Shore every summer. And by 2022, that number was very close to being back around 5,000, like 4,800 and change or something. So I haven't seen 2023 data, but my guess is it's probably largely back to where it historically has been, something like that.
Okay, that's excellent news. Thank you. And I guess just sort of to follow off of that, and perhaps some of our employers on the panel can speak to this. There has been some discussion as to whether or not there's a skills gap with employees. So they were wondering if you felt that employees entering the tourism industry had applicable skills for the industry, or if you noticed a gap.
I can't answer that.
What was I didn't hear the
yeah, I don't.
skills
No,
gap?
if you
Skills
perhaps
gap, yeah.
Skills
noticed a
employees,
skills
yeah.
gap.
We're not seeing any gap.
Okay, excellent. Those were the last questions that we were going to take from our online panel, online guests. And we'll now move the event to its conclusion.
Well, thank you so much to everyone online and everyone in person for coming today. Thank you to Mark and Oliver and Dan and Gary and Sarah and Jane for putting this all together and for coming and supporting the 16th annual Jersey Shorecast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.